So this is the second soils video, and it focuses more on soil profiles and where soil comes from. Now, we've been in class talking about some of these things, but just to reiterate, the very top, on top of the soil is what's referred to as the O horizon. So a profile is made up of different layers or horizons. And at the very top, we have dead material that has dropped down. So it's organic, and this includes stuff like feces, it includes dead organisms, and it also includes leaves and sticks and things like that. And so that's organic material that has lots of nutrients. And so first, detritivores and decomposers need to start to break that down into even smaller pieces. And so that would be in here. The humus is in the topsoil, or A horizon. Those are usually synonymous, topsoil and A horizon. And so that gives the topsoil a much darker color than the rest of the soil. And it increases both the water holding capacity, the humus has lots of water in it, and the nutrient levels. And so that's where you're going to find the roots of pretty much all plants. And you're also going to find little worms and organisms that live in the soil. This is where they are. This diagram makes it look really deep. That's not always the case. We'll see some different profiles of different types of ecosystems. The A horizon is going to vary quite greatly between different ecosystems. In some ecosystems, some soils are going to have a zone of eluviation or leaching, referred to as the E horizon, where it's the same kind of material, but the water transport actually picks up minerals out of the soil and carries them down as water percolates or infiltrates through. And so because of the properties of the minerals that are there and the clay content, the texture, certain soils allow for that to happen. And so you'll have a very, very pale, almost white soil right below the very dark A. And then underneath, most soils will not even have that. They'll go straight to the subsoil, or B horizon. This makes it look like that's the palest, but often this is a yellow, orange, almost red color. And so this is largely dependent on the material that is weathering, the parent material down here. There may be some accumulation from other locations, and the only roots you'll really find down into the E and B horizon are tree roots that are, their main purpose is structural integrity, preventing the tree from tipping over, or water absorption, because there can be water in the soil that has percolated down through, and so there will be water available to them, whereas smaller plants don't even bother because there's no nutrients and there's less water available. At the bottom, we have the C horizon, which is the parent material that has been started to break down, but often we'll see sort of large chunks of rock that are what's native to that region. And then going further down, you'll get all the way down where water has not started to break apart the parent material, and so you'll have pretty much solid parent material. I say rock, most locations are based off of rock as the parent material, but you have certain places like the Caribbean islands where you may have coral skeletons that are actually the material that's getting weathered and contributing to the soil. And then it is possible to have anthropogenic or human materials down there. So within a city, you're going to have the weathering of concrete and things like that that's been buried under other stuff as the parent material, technically. So welcome to the Anthropocene, the time frame where human activities have dominated. All right, so here is a cutaway showing one example of a soil that's very, very rich. The A horizon is rather deep. This is a good 6 inches. We've got B horizon here, very dark, and you can see that there are chunks of parent material. This is water that's started to fill it up. There are chunks of parent material, so we're getting down to the C horizon. Not all soils are quite that neat and tidy, though. So where does soil come from? Well, you got to think about the fact that we have rock that is being either uplifted because of tectonic activity or created from volcanoes getting to the surface, and you have to be able to break that solid rock up into little pieces. So the weathering that happens is because of rain and the chemicals within that, and then also freezing and thawing actually drives water as wedges down into the soil, breaking it up a little bit more. You can have physical abrasion, so sand being pushed across the surface will actually physically weather. And some organisms also can weather rock. So for example, the first types of organisms that grow on bare rock are lichens. They look like little splotches, and the way that they are able to hold on so tight to the rock is they secrete acid, a mild acid, that digs into and allows them to make little almost like roots into the rock. So that starts to break down the rock, and as organic material accumulates on the rock surface, you also end up with acids from the organisms as they decay. So tannic acids and other mild like carbonic acids, which will slowly eat away at the rock. And as the rock is getting broken into tiny pieces, we're also accumulating dead material on top, and organisms that are living and moving in the soil, whether it's because of their roots or because of their physical activities like worms and whatnot, they actually mix those inorganic pieces with the organic material, and you start to accumulate something that's actually soil. Plants can start to make roots in that. And as more plants grow, they add more dead material. They are food for animals that come in. And so the organic components start to increase. The amount of water held within that starts to increase, which increases the weathering of the rock below. And so over time, and we're talking about, about a couple thousand years, you start to have something that has actual horizons because enough time has passed for the accumulation of both sediments and organic material to develop. And so we can see what it might look like in an area where rock has been exposed. This is what we're talking about. There's rock here, and over time there has been some organic material, and we can see that there are breaks in the rock. Those are from all kinds of weathering factors, and soil is starting to fill those gaps, and you can imagine that the weathering is going to now happen at a faster rate at the places where the breaks are. You'll still have larger boulders, but over time, give that a couple thousand years and come back to it, and you will have a much deeper A horizon and B horizon developed. Depending on precipitation, temperature, the kinds of organisms that live in a location, wind patterns, etc., we can have different soil profiles that are indicative of different ecosystems. So a grassland soil, the prairies, the reason they are the breadbaskets is because you have a very high amount of precipitation that happens in the spring, and you have a lot of grasses that can grow, but there isn't enough water for trees. And so the grasses have a very quick lifespan. They grow, they die, they leave their dead material on the soil. That gets decomposed very quickly, but you don't have trees sucking the nutrients up out of there. And so you end up with a very thick, rich A horizon. In a similar ecosystem that gets more rain, you're actually going to get more trees growing, and that means that the A horizon with its nutrients gets depleted almost as quickly of nutrients as they're added through decomposition. So You don't have as deep an A horizon in forest regions like New England as you would in the center of continents like the steppes of Russia or in China or in the United States in the Great Plains. In regions where temperatures are a bit colder and you have a dominant species being conifers, these are pine trees that can withstand much colder temperatures, then the thing to know about pine trees is that they accumulate a lot of acids in their pine needles and drop that as a form of preventing competition. So conifers actually change the pH of the soil that they're in, and therefore they prevent other plants from growing around them. That makes the soil have a lower pH, which is something that influences the ability of the E horizon to proliferate. Whereas in a deciduous forest, the fact that deciduous trees drop their leaves every year means that there is a lot more organic material going into the soil, and the A horizon does tend to be a bit deeper in deciduous forests than in coniferous forests. In warmer climates, you would sort of almost expect a tropical rainforest to have really rich soil. However, the incredibly fast growth rates of the plants means that as soon as decomposers break down any dead material, that organic and inorganic nutrient material is instantly gobbled up. And so very little is left sitting in the soil. They do tend to have more acidic soils, and so again you have that E horizon. Finally, in deserts, this makes it look as though there's often a really deep amount of soil, but in reality, proportionate to something like a prairie or a forest, this entire range of A and B horizons may be only 5 centimeters deep. Because with the low amount of rain, we tend to have the soil be very loose, very few plants are able to grow there, and so erosion from rain, when it does come, which is, you get flash floods in the desert, or wind, even during the dry periods, that is often eroding, moving the sediments and the soil away from the area. And so the parent material is actually a lot closer to the surface than in any of these other types of ecosystems. Okay, so that's a brief overview of the soil profiles, where soil comes from, and then how soil profiles might differ depending on an ecosystem and its climate.